Well, it's kind of a long and short story, I guess, how I became interested in the Air Force. I was going to school, and there's a little thing in college, and there's a little thing called the Vietnam War was on. And the Air Force recruiter had been calling my mom and dad to see if I was interested in doing that. And he was pretty persistent, so they, my dad said, "Why don't you just give him a call and see what he has to say?" And so I did. I called him, and he said, "How would you like to be an Air Force officer and fly airplanes?" I said, "Well, I hadn't really thought about it. I was kind of an athlete, so I always thought I was going to be a coach and a biology teacher. But I took what they call the AFOQT, which is the Air Force Officer Qualifying Test, to see whether I was qualified to be an officer, pilot, or a navigator. Turns out I qualified for all three. And the recruiter said, "Well, what do you want to do? You want to be a pilot or a navigator?" And I said, "Well, they both fly, don't they?" And he said, "Trust me, you want to be a pilot." My first flight was called the Dollar Ride. And they asked me, "Well, what do you want to do on this ride?" I had never flown before. I had only flown down from Buffalo, New York to San Antonio to go to officer training school. Anyway, so I said, "Hey, let's fly, I would like to fly level inverted and do a loop." I had no idea really what I was talking about, because level inverted requires you to turn upside down and pull a -1 G to stay level. And your body, and it turns out that that particular airplane was not set up to do that. It would have cavitated the engine and flamed it out. So we couldn't do that, but we could go weightless. And then we did a loop. And we get down on the ground, and I gave him my dollar. And he says, "Well, how'd you like that?" And I looked at him and I went, "They're going to pay me to do this." And I was hooked from that point on. I thought, what a way to live my life. People go around and never find what they really want to do in life. I was so fortunate that I found out right away that I wanted to be a pilot, and I wanted to be in the Air Force. So I was really lucky in that respect. I was always very shy, and I figured when I was given the opportunity to be an academic instructor, they'd send you to school. So I went to another school and became an academic instructor. I figured I've got to get over this shyness and be able to speak on my feet and so forth. So I did that. And then at that point, Vietnam was kind of winding down, and they were looking for C-130 pilots at Clark Air Force Base. I was in the running for an F4 and an F-111, but they didn't have them available when my assignment came up. So I went to be a C-130 pilot, and it turned out to be a great experience in the Philippines. And I was involved back then was the evacuations of Saigon, Phnom Penh. And then maybe you heard about the USS Mayaguez that the Khmer Rouge, yes, thank you, abducted over there. It was a merchant ship, and President Ford had just become president, and so we flew reconnaissance cover over the island of Mayaguez, while the F-4s and the gunships kind of raked them down there and got the folks rescued. After that, I left. I got selected to go to the TAC-SAC, that's Tactical Air Command, which I was in the C-130s, to the Strategic Air Command, and fly B-52s. So I went to 6 months of schooling. The family went there. We had two kids, a boy and a girl, and we went up to Merced, California, to Castle Air Force Base, and it was 6 months of training. Because I was instructor pilot in the C-130, I was able to move into the left seat of the B-52 right away, which is the captain's seat. Mm-hmm. And it turned out that my experience in air refueling in the C-130 really helped me out in air refueling in the B-52, which was really hard to do because of the 8 engines on the airplane, and it was very heavy controls. So they had a air refueling autopilot, they called it, which was just hydraulic assist to air refuel in a B-52. At that time when we had nuclear alert, and so we would be confined to the nuclear facility, alert facility, for 7 days in a row. Our response time was we had to be airborne. If the horn went off, we validated the code from the National Command Authority that we were going to go. We had to be off the ground in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So you had to live right there with your airplane. And we had a lot of weapons on the airplane, basically short-range attack missiles. Talked about those before, I think. Mm-hmm. And then big high-yield bombs, 4 of those 20 megatons each. And the short-range attack missiles were 200 kilotons each, and we had 8 of those. So if we ever had to go, we had our cold weather, our big bags of whatever equipment we needed, we had to carry out with us. Our helmets were, our visors had a gold lining that we could put down to help us from the blasts. But the main thing was when these short-range attack missiles would go off, they'd take off, go supersonic, and normally go in front of us and wipe out anything that would be in our way for bombing with the big ones. Mm-hmm. And because of that, there would be nuclear flashes and things going off from other aircraft too. So we had what we called our lead curtain, which when we take off of one of those, we'd push it and pull it and get it in front of the aircraft or on the screen of the aircraft. And then if we had to air refuel, we had a little window about so big that we would pull that off so we could see the airplane and air refuel with. And then, I don't know why they gave us, if one guy was air refueling, they gave us a patch to put over one eye, just in case we had a flash. We would still have that good eye, yeah. And then you'd let the other guy fly and so forth. But it's kind of a scary thing to think about. But that was what we had set up to do, and we fortunately never had to do that. Our typical training mission for the B-52 was we'd take off, either fly a low-level mission, that's probably about 300 feet off the ground, 300 to 500 feet off the ground. And then we would do a high-altitude bombing run. These were all radar bombing. We didn't carry bombs. We would pulse the radar facility, and they could tell us how close we were.
Hey, what about Major Kong?
One mission in the B-52 was at the end we did a night fighter intercept exercise with a guard unit from up in Portland, and we were off the coast of California, somewhere between around Los Angeles or a couple hundred miles off Los Angeles. We finished up the fighter intercept exercise, and they went home, and we were tooling to go back to Sacramento, I believe. And all of a sudden we saw these light flashes up in front of us, the side of us, front of us again, and the co-pilot and myself were just kind of mesmerized. We were just watching these things pop around. And so I asked the navigator, I said, is there anybody below us? Any ships below us or anything? He says, no, nobody's down there. It's all clear. and then we were too far away from any landmass, so we don't know what it was. Mm-hmm. And I remember looking over at the co-pilot as he looked over at me, and he said, "Yeah, I saw him too." And that's where it left. You could call it a UFO sighting or whatever, but we never called it anything because we never told anybody. But that was one interesting mission. Another time, we were flying into Midway Island in the Pacific. Yeah. And there wasn't any stars, there wasn't any horizon. It was at night, no moon, and I was coming in, and it was clear, but I was doing a visual pattern, and I started to turn. I looked outside and I looked back inside, and I got spatially disoriented. Mm-hmm. I mean, my head started spinning. I couldn't tell what was up, what was down. Wow. And so I fortunately asked the co-pilot, "Are you okay?" He said, "Yes." And so he took the airplane for a while until my inner ear and everything got adjusted. Wow. But that was fortunately I had somebody with me. Now that happens to people in single seat aircraft, and it's tough. Yeah. At night.
What year did you retire?
I retired in 1995.
95. And when did you join the Air Force?
1969. So 26 years and some change. And then I spent almost 12 years at Southwest Airlines. Being an officer in the Air Force or Army or Navy is a responsibility, and it becomes more responsible as you move up in rank. As a captain, as an aircraft commander, I was responsible for my crew. And as you move up as a squadron commander, I had a squadron that I was responsible for. And I always felt, whether I was a squadron commander or a wing commander, that my job was to get the materials and the things that the people that worked for me or for the command or needed to get the job done. I had no qualms about my particular position and worrying about being promoted. I just wanted to do what needed to be done to support the troops that were supporting and working the mission. And I felt strongly about that. And at one point, I was considered to go further. I met all the blocks, if you will, worked my way up as went to Air War College, did Squadron Officer School, did Air Command and Staff College, had the different commands, had the headquarters assignment, did all of that. And at one point, sometimes you become asked to do things maybe that you don't feel are right, and you just have to stand up and say, "I'm not going to do that." I came across that a few times. You had to look yourself in the mirror, if you will, and I think I was considered to go to general officer, but I must have upset somebody that nixed me on that. So, and I don't have a problem with that. Had a good career, 26 years in the Air Force. I was offered a job, but I didn't think, I would care for it. And it's not just me; it's the family. Your family is with you through all of this, and I felt that my wife had had enough. A lot of responsibility for the wives as well, and opportunities and responsibilities. And so it was time to move on and do something else. And fortunately, I had a good friend that I worked with in the Air Force that was an assistant chief pilot at Southwest Airlines, and he'd been waiting for me to say that I was going to retire. So I went and got my type rating in a 737 and applied to Southwest Airlines and got picked up to go to class. So
Was that easy?
it was, yeah, it was fairly easy. They put you through a good training session, and it was a pleasure to work for Southwest. They're a great company.